I lost my left leg below the knee 9 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And I've hiked across the Grand Canyon in a single day on a prosthetic leg. So that is a really defining thing that a lot of people, to me, have seen as that's loss and that's heartbreak. And we'll all talk about Julie being an amputee, but it's not, right? That was not loss. That was like a rebirth.
Could you begin just by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Julie Tolleson. I'm a lawyer out in Golden, Colorado, here with a big school district. 62 years old, just had a birthday. That's who I am.
How many years?
62.
Okay. I only ask you to repeat it because I think part of the reason that we were introduced is because of our age difference.
Yeah.
And so it seems relevant. Now I usually start this by asking someone to introduce themselves, and they say, "This is my name, this is my job." But I'm going to linger on that for a second because you are also my therapist sibling.
Yes, I am.
And I don't want to make like too big a deal out of that, but it feels like pretty remarkable to me that Jennifer, who's my therapist, is like, when I started doing this project, she was like, "You have to talk to Julie." And there's like, it's easy to imagine a therapist who's like too protective of their personal life or whatever to make that kind of an introduction. And so I wonder what you think is going on there, that like without missing a beat, Jennifer was like, "You guys got to get together."
And I am not going to have probably the level of insight I should, because I was a bit surprised. I mean, obviously nobody knows your life story, almost nobody, better than siblings, right? When somebody that's been there from the day you exited the womb, and we're close and have a very candid relationship where we've shared some of the same heartbreaks and losses, right? That's the nature of family, and processed some about what things have looked like.
Yeah. But I wonder, I mean, for me, it feels like, whatever kind of like hunger I have to like know more about Jennifer, or like be more integrated in her life or something, like this really satisfies that. But I wonder what it's like for you to have that part of her life pulled into yours, to have someone reach out from that part of her world.
It feels surprising because Jennifer is such a consummate professional, right? And so her desire is to probably maintain exactly the right kinds of boundaries in the therapist-client relationship. And so to say, here, Julie, who knows all the secrets, right, of childhood and of growing up, is going to be talking to one of my clients.
Yeah.
So I want to honor that for her.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I was once struggling with a case where, I don't want to share that. I was struggling with a case and I really needed to just tell someone what I thought about what was going on with them. And I was sort of wringing my hands in a session with Jennifer, and I was like, this is what I think is up. And it was a really strange situation. I was like, but this is what I think is happening. And she was like, "Well, just tell the guy." And I was like, "Well, shouldn't I be exploring what his fantasies of why this or why that?" And she looked through the Zoom like you are me now and was like, "Oh, I'm too old to be this precious about psychoanalysis."
Oh, that sounds like her,
yeah. So my sense is that maybe like across her career, this is my fantasy, is that across her career, she's like kind of willing to let it all hang out more or something.
Well, and she's never completely been a rule follower, right? I mean, it's
right. Okay.
So she's got enough iconoclast in her. So get to that age where we're like, we're going to do what we want.
Yeah. Yeah, I've I've tried to scrutinize, as we do as clients, like some areas of her identity and her life, and I can feel her being like not irritated that I'm interested, but like that I'm maybe trying to put her in boxes. That it's like, oh God, I don't like. What do you want to know? Just say it.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's cool. I like that about her.
yeah. I mean, she defies boxes for sure. I mean, right? So,
Um, so you've listened a bit to the podcast, and you're aware that this season's about heartbreak, and we met for to talk about doing this, and so I heard a bit about what came to mind. But I wonder if you can share, once that idea gets introduced to you, like what comes up for you? What are your associations?
yeah, and it was knowing my sister had recommended me to do this. My
Yeah,
first thought is, what heartbreak is she thinking of? And then there was a point at which I'm like, that's not the question, right? I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yes,
And
yeah,
it was an idle curiosity for me. And then thinking about the things that tend to make people think I'm interesting. For example, like I lost my left leg below the knee 9 years ago,
yeah.
right? And I've hiked across the Grand Canyon in a single day on a prosthetic leg. Like, so that is a really defining thing that a lot of people, to me, have seen as that's loss and that's heartbreak. And we'll all talk about Julie being an amputee, but it's not, right? That was not loss. That was like a rebirth, right? I had an old injury that had impaired my ability to be as active as I wanted, and I had an elective amputation so that I could run again and hike again and climb again and go up big mountains and all those things. So I realized when you asked your question, I had to have that soul searching moment of like, this isn't about just going, what is the thing that people sometimes think it's interesting for Julie to talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was what is it for me? And when
Can
it
I can I just ask though, why wasn't that a traumatic loss for you?
because the original injury was probably where the trauma and loss had been.
Uh,
My identity through my 20s and early 30s was as a sort of outdoor adventure climber, mountaineer, like all those things. And
mhm,
so the loss of identity and the heartbreak for me came when I had a big road bike crash and just trashed my left foot and series of surgeries and years on and off crutches, and had to settle into an identity that wasn't the one I had originally had and chosen. I threw myself into work, drank too much, I gained weight, like I did all these things. So that was where the heartbreak was. So finding a surgeon who said, have you considered amputation, and realizing I
mhm,
could restore my life by using a prosthetic leg rather than a bad foot
yeah.
was actually the healing, right?
Wow.
Yeah. It was
Unexpected.
the non-religious side of being born again, right? For me. So,
Uh,
yeah. So it was like, that's not my, losing a leg is not my heartbreak subject.
uh-huh. Yeah. It was right, because if like, yeah, like the what comes to mind if you like imagine an amputation, you think of someone saying, well, I'm losing this part of myself. I'm not going to be who I thought I was, but for you it was a return.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And so, well, why can I scratch a little bit at that? What was what was the initial, like, being the outdoors person, the adventurer? How come?
Where did that start? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I um, I was a very unathletic kid. I'm dreadfully farsighted, and I only see out of one eye at a time, which actually means I don't have any depth perception. So
Yeah.
I had always conceived of myself as just unathletic. So I was like a good student, was what I did. And
Yeah.
actually, I give my sister Jennifer a lot of credit when I moved back to Arizona after law school. She said, "Do you want to hike the Grand Canyon?"
Mhm.
And I said I did, and I trained for it. And all of a sudden, I realized that I could do really hard things,
Mm-hmm.
It didn't, as long as it doesn't involve catching a pop-up fly, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I had a very sense from like childhood PE of what athleticism was.
Yeah. Gym class.
Yeah, a gym class, right? Which is a horror for many of us, and including me. Across generations, right? Something we all
I'm really excited to talk about this. It's a subject I care about. I have after in a couple hours after this, I go down the street to a local gym and I run a free. Um, it's like a for beginners bodybuilding weightlifting class, and the idea is really just to like make the equipment as accessible as possible because I like doing that stuff, but people the barriers to getting in there and maybe learning that you like it are huge, and it's not explicitly a queer group, but I do think that traditional, I mean, this is not a super unique idea, but traditionally uh, traditional athletic environments are like not queer friendly often, and so I think we can be made to feel like that's not for us, and there's like, but then there's like so much joy in that kind of stuff. Anyway, sorry, please.
Yeah, no, and it can be such a confidence builder, especially if you've never seen yourself as a physically capable person. And so from that first backpacking trip with my sister, I sort of took to it like a fish to water. And
Yeah.
I took a course and learned to rock climb. You know what I mean? So I took a course and learned how to use a ice axe and build snow anchors and climb. Like I just started realizing, oh, if I'm willing to open myself up to learning it, as long as it doesn't require that hand-eye coordination, that is a really small part of what it means to be athletic.
Yeah.
I can do things, and it was it was my primary joy for sure. Outdoor will spaces.
Uh-huh. What psychically? Why? Like what is the psychic meaning of that? I don't know if you think about it that way, but
Um, I could be in my head horribly, right? I mean, and I'm a very left-brained, and lawyer by training, but also that's kind of innately how I'm wired. That I don't turn off my thoughts very well. So I think the outdoors is both you're really like in your body. Like sometimes if you're just going up something that's steep and rocky and deciding where your steps are going to be and your heart rate's really elevated, like I'm out of all that other place.
yeah,
Is a
yeah,
lot of it. And then I think there were some little glimpses from childhood about, being in the outdoors. My family were not campers, but we would like do things where we would go to the mountains and see things or go out in the desert and admire the view. And there was something always just like it felt really calming to just be out.
yeah. One with nature.
Yeah. So,
Uh-huh. Um, so, but people, there's like a people have there's a projection on you that like, oh, the amputation must have been so painful, or what do they think?
yeah, I mean, they think that even that I remember when I went in for the surgery, and they come in and they're giving you like an epidural and all that stuff because they're gonna cut your leg off, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Their first reaction is pat on you, and I'm like, "I'm excited." I mean, sort of, right? And it was a lot harder than I expected. I mean, I don't mean to minimize it at all, but I think the assumption is that it's a loss.
Yeah,
Also, sometimes people want to ask me what happened, and they project a huge self-consciousness in doing so. And I don't consider it a story that anybody should be any more self-conscious about that than asking, what does your tattoo mean, right? I mean,
like they get anxious about talking about it
yeah,
because
feels
it
intrusive. They don't know if it's going to be like a fragile, sensitive subject for me. Because they assume that it was a big loss.
right. Uh-huh. Yeah. But you may be a little proud.
I Yeah, and I think especially now being back out in the wilderness, the combination of being 62 and being an amputee means that nothing is as fast or easy as it was when I was young.
Hmm.
And I'm a really proud person, so I feel self conscious about that. Like we go with a group, and I'm always in the back. I don't love that. It plays in my head a lot. Um, and yet, then usually a stranger will come up to me and say, wow, it's amazing you're out here, kind of thing. And I know some amputees hate that. They find it patronizing. But it really honestly helps me because sometimes I'm not fully appreciating what I'm doing. And I need somebody to remind.
Right. Yeah. It is. Yeah. That is a funny, the like embarrassment of being encouraged.
Yeah. It's like you can imagine you're running your first 5K and you feel like you're, barely breathing, and somebody breezes by you and goes, "You're doing awesome." You're like, should that be insulting to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're really being kind, and I will accept the kindness of the intention. And I
Mhm.
also, it helps me because I don't run 8-minute miles anymore. I run 12-minute miles across the
Right.
country, right? And sometimes I need to be reminded that that's a good job. We
Uh-huh.
never outgrow needing to be told we're doing a good job. Um, just like we never outgrow wanting to call our mom when we're sick.
Uh-huh. I'm a slow runner. I'm like a 9 or 10 minute mile, and I I'm just slow. But I look like I can run fast, but I can't. Julie, why don't we take a break there, and then I want to come back and I want to hear about actually then I want to hear about what did devastate you.
All right.
Um, okay. Uh, so Julie, we've established that there's a kind of easy answer, untrue answer about your heartbreak that relates to being an amputee, but that's not really what um, it's not really the story you have to tell about heartbreak.
Yeah. I have another non-true story just
Uh-huh.
because it was another one of those defining moments that I'm like, why was it not the one I seized upon as we were thinking about heartbreak?
Yeah.
But in my various chapters of my life, when I was about 41, I was a partner at a downtown Denver law firm and decided to chuck everything and run to Arkansas. And I worked as a felony public defender there for 6.5 years.
Okay. And
And
sorry, from what kind of law to public defender?
I was a partner at a downtown law firm. I was mostly representing doctors and a lot of medical defense kind of cases, so not criminal law at all.
Yeah.
And went, and I just wanted to reinvent myself there. And one of the hardest experiences I had as a public defender was I had a capital murder death penalty case in 2008, and uh, it did not have compelling defenses. So I tried that case, and at the end of it, my client was sentenced to death. He was a 20-year-old African American kid originally from New Orleans who had been displaced to Fayetteville by Hurricane Katrina, and it made the courtroom spin. When the verdict came back, and you could have cut the racism with a knife. And knowing what a defining moment that was for me, I was like, why is that not my biggest heartbreak story? And I think a couple of things struck me that verdict in that space, in that racism, and on those facts was probably going to happen no matter who was defending him. They had offered him a sentence of life without parole in exchange for a guilty plea. But trying to persuade a 19-year-old to throw their life away, and he just wouldn't do it. So why was that death sentence? Because it was so upsetting. I think it was going to happen anyway, and I'm glad I was there for him, because especially African American defendants, but poor people in general in the criminal justice system, are not treated with kindness and dignity, sometimes even by the people that represent them.
Yeah.
And I felt like I got we still write letters every now and then. I still feel like I got to be that for him and for his family.
This person is still living.
Yes, he is. He's on death row. You know how it takes. So he's just sitting on Arkansas death row still.
I don't actually. I know a very close friend and avid listener to this podcast. My friend Bobby it has a long career as a public defender, and so I know about that. But I actually have not really encountered someone who's been through this. Like I don't. You don't say that, and I don't have like a lot of associations. It seems like a very singular experience.
Yeah, it is really uncommon, and to have somebody who had only been practicing, even though I was 20 years out of law school by then, had only been practicing criminal law for 2 or 3 years. I will tell you, in Colorado, in the public defender system, they would never have given a lawyer that junior a capital murder case. But this is how it rolled in Arkansas. It's sort of like, here, this is
the least important.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, or, just other people don't want to do them. They're too much work, because they're a lot of work, because you're dealing with both the facts of guilt or innocence, but a whole component to the sentencing phase of a capital murder trial. How do you persuade a jury, even if they've convicted your client of murder, how do you persuade them that it is enough to sentence them to life without parole?
Yeah.
Sending them to death row. So, so you won't find that many folks who have experienced it because it was a very strange situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you say his name? Is that?
Yeah, his name is Gregory Decay, Decay.
Okay. And what how's he doing? I can't even I don't even know what to ask.
I know. Well, and honestly, when I write to him, I don't always know what to ask. I've tried to send him books from time to time. You can't mail them directly in a package. You have to order them from Amazon and they'll go. And every now and then I throw some money on his books, like $50 so he can buy snacks. Because his family has basically hasn't seen him in a decade. And I don't know exactly what that's about. I know they were in huge denial through the trial of dealing with what he was accused of doing. And at first they weren't even going to come up to Fayetteville for the trial because they were so afraid. These are people that had really almost never been out of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
His mom said, she's like, he had never been more than 5 miles off my front porch before the storm displaced them. And so I remember her asking when I was trying to get them to come up for the trial, she's like, is there a Klan up there? And, Fayetteville in the scheme of things is kind of a liberal college town, if you want to call it that, right? It is the home of the University of Arkansas. It is a little blue island like a lot of college towns are in conservative spaces. And I was like, no, there's no danger. But he had, killed 2 white kids, one of whom the dad was like a superstar football coach, right? So I think they were right to be fearful of public reaction. But
yeah.
Anyway, so his family has kind of stayed away ever since. So he's really alone, and I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because, none of us wants to be judged by what we did on our worst day. Most of us just try to hang out with people who don't even know what we did on our worst day, right? Much less have it splashed across the. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I still have. That's from the trial. So that's brown hair me. And Gregory. So and that was taken. That was like on the front page of the local paper or whatever during the trial. So that's where that was from. There was a little window above the jury box where they could sit there and take photos.
Why do you think it's like a large photo of what I'm sure is a really horrible memory. Why do you think you have that in your office with you?
Because sometimes I think nothing in life will ever be that hard. So when hard things are happening, I can look at that. And maybe because I feel like I'm supposed to remember, I'm not supposed to just forget. He deserves at least that much, and That's a really good question, though I haven't thought about it. I've just always wanted it, and as I've changed, jobs since then, it's followed me, and it's always been in a relatively, prominent place in my.
Hmm.
I don't. It's not like I look at it every day, but it's always there.
Yeah. But it wasn't, it didn't break your heart. So what are you saying when you say it didn't break your heart? It did, it was like tragic, it's persisted, life defining, but not heartbreaking.
Not in the way, because I think for me, heartbreak has a loss component, an unsolvable loss component. And maybe to that, it was a trauma. It was the first time I thought I got a glimpse of what, when people talk about PTSD, sort of, when I would have to go back to the courthouse, because it was a courthouse in which I practiced, and
Yeah.
the way the courtroom smelled, or the way the bathrooms, like, yeah,
Yeah.
I was very sort of triggered in the courthouse for a while after that.
Your memory,
Yeah,
it like messed with your memory in that way.
and
Yeah.
that's just my memory, and then I would get really anxious, and that did subside over time. But so it was a very defining trauma, but it didn't somehow, when we talk about heartbreak, it was not what where that word resonated, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah, interesting to think about that. Like maybe heartbreak isn't possible in in like a truly traumatic experience. Like if the definition of trauma is that it overwhelms us to the degree that the symptoms you're talking about happen, maybe it's like actually too. It's like something bigger,
Yeah, yeah,
something bigger. But
yeah,
heartbreak, you
yeah,
really know it while it's happening. You really feel it.
yeah. And it, to me, heartbreak has just felt like a no way out or past. People say the only way out is through, and you just think, oh, well, then enough time goes by, and then it'll be better. But
Mhm. How did you? Sorry, I just want to know about how you. Uh, how did you? I mean, you had to keep being a lawyer. How did you handle doing the job in that state, in that with that PTSD?
um, well, I went into therapy, which definitely helped, and all you can really do at that moment is kind of throw yourself into other cases. Like, let me find one to make me feel better, or get a different outcome, or um, but it probably just left some simply unaddressed lingering effects. I had a very bad relationship with that judge, and it probably only worsened. And whether that was me or that was him, I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, advocating for poor people and people of color in that particular courtroom was a recipe for being really, really disliked. So,
Right.
and I was the only Spanish speaker on the team, so I had our immigrants too a lot of times.
I bet. I worked for a really long time in community mental health with people living in like really extreme poverty, which I'd never seen before that job. And I, nothing as extreme as that, but in terms of like well, there was violence, but I, I, I identify with, I think the experience you're talking about, which is like, there was absolutely a vicarious trauma of, and I went through for a while, an experience of getting like really depressed about it. And it was this kind of like, well, I'll just go down with the ship. Like, what right do I have to like leave this work and go to dinner with my friends and have a great time? Like this is it's like it's like delusional. I like have to stay in the tragedy of this. And but then also like knowing that that's not really right either. and feeling really proud of it in some way to have like, um, yeah, that's like a bravado about it actually. Um, and just that whole mix of things was in there.
Oh yeah, because it's hard and you did it, right? And a lot of people wouldn't, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's a little common thread with the post amputee life too. Sometimes you're like, it's a hard thing, but I did it, and I can feel better about that.
Yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Can you? How did therapy help with those symptoms? What was there a particular modality or like?
We honestly we did a lot of sort of real being present and being present in my body again because Julie's big go-to is just being her head.
Yeah.
So did a lot of more like the breathing and sit, and you can feel the chair and you can feel your feet. Like I did a lot of work of getting back into my body in a space that was calming, more than the sort of we're going to really talk about what happened. I know one of the things the therapist really thought is it had a lot in common with what she sees people that are in those sort of chronically traumatic service, maybe like you're working in community mental health, like, like paramedics,
Yeah.
like law enforcement, they're sort of under this constant low grade and the occasional really high blip sort of stress. And some of it was just so I could sleep again, frankly, as much as it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Um, yeah, there can be a real emphasis on like going over the details of like what happened and say how bad it was and feel it again and
Yeah. And
um,
if somebody tells you that that'll help, that's great. But I needed sort of, I needed other kinds of skills that I didn't have.
yeah, yeah, for sure there is value in particularly in the kinds of violence that people aren't supposed to talk about, like saying it out loud, being believed. Um, but I think Jennifer actually said something to me once. We were talking about this, and she was like, yeah, like the trauma therapy and going over the details and putting together the timeline of what happened. But like at the end of the day, people have to like walk out the door and like be in the world. Like they need to know, and because as therapists, there can be this tension between like behavioral versus like emotional work and but it's like, yeah, you gotta live your life.
Yeah, you do, and you need the skills that help you adapt, right? And I mean, and I think that's one of the hardest things for me. And thinking about Jennifer's practice is because I'm always looking for a much quicker fix.
Uh-huh.
uh,
Yeah. Well, why do you say that? Because like
oh,
I
because
imagine
of that sort
imagine
of
that trial was long and grueling and
yeah, yeah. But I have a very fundamentally impatient personality. Like that's like one of my core weaknesses that manifests itself in lots of different ways. But so it includes therapy, right? Like I'm like, can't we just see each other about 6 or 8 times and then I can feel better?
oh, uh-huh.
So that's when I say, the sort of labor intensive patient work of this more sort of psychoanalytically inspired kind of thing that
Yeah.
therapy is. Um, there's a point at which it's terrible. I'm like, I just want to move on.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
True confessions, especially for a
Yeah.
sibling.
Yeah. Um Julie, let's take one more break and then we'll come back and yeah. So so what we've been saying so far is like there are things that can be um like truly body altering, life ending, and those things can be all kinds of hard, but it's different than heartbreak.
Yeah. Um, for me, the main thing that I had that true, and I kind of went back and, we see heartbreak, we always think of that as romantic heartbreak. it was like the real sort of, dark night of the soul, my heart is broken forever thing was really the loss of my father. And almost to the point where I'm like, I don't understand, because most of us chronologically, like if things happen in the sort of cycle of life, most of us live through losing parents, right? And I know you indicated you lost your dad when you were reasonably young, right? Teenager, maybe something.
No, I was 38, so I certainly acting like a teenager, but I was middle aged.
Yeah. So, and I will say to another degree, I mean, really losing both of my parents, but he was the first one, and he was the one I was the closest to. And one of the things I realized, I'm going to give you a really weird analogy example. Another thing that I remember as heartbreak, when I was much younger, I feel almost self-conscious saying this. I was a huge John Denver fan, 70s era folk artist, right? Rocky
Yeah.
Mountain, like huge.
Yeah.
When he died in a plane crash in 1997, I sobbed for several days.
Uh-huh.
And I remember thinking, why am I so desperately heartbroken about this? Because it's not like I had creepy fan stalker thing. They could, if I knew that he was being interviewed on the, Tonight Show or whatever, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I have to stay up and watch. It wasn't, I mean, yes, I'd seen him sometimes live and had records and whatever. And then I was like, well, what is that about? And I really realized that was so the soundtrack of my childhood and a big part of the soundtrack of Jennifer's.
Yeah.
Like to the point where his music produced almost like a visual memories. Mm-hmm. And also like tactile memories, that thing. If we grew up mostly in Arizona, like it's in the heat, you're in the desert, or you're in the mountains fishing next to your dad. Like it was the soundtrack of all those things.
Yeah.
I realized so much from that my really profound grief was just all about me, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm never going to see John Denver in concert again.
Yeah. Well, of course.
And it's funny, and then talking to my sisters, and I think I was the one that sort of had that the hardest, but I think we all had some of it. And the loss was like the loss of this thing that wouldn't be anymore. And obviously none of those things are going to be anymore because I'm not 12 and I'm not on a Girl Scout trip.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow it felt like they always could be because all the trappings of them were still around. They stay in touch with some of the same people.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so when my dad passed, and I had some of those same overwhelming feelings, and I started thinking maybe this is always what grief is, that it's about us, that it's not to say that I don't miss my dad, and you always think about when you want to pick up the phone and call, and I just want to hear their voice, but mostly when I think about missing my dad, I'm picturing things, conversations we had and things we did that may have been 20 years ago, may have been 40 years ago. At 62, they may have been 55 years ago. And it feels gone forever, and then I feel really mortal.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
Like, that's the next thing. It's one of the reasons people are always like, when are you going to retire? I'm like, I don't know, because the only thing that happens after you retire is and that sounds sort of flip, but I kind of have this feeling like my parents are gone, and then if I don't work, like, then I'm just sitting around and waiting until I die.
The most crass way I've heard this described is that like we're next on the conveyor belt, like it's like, and that is kind of what it feels like. It's like, okay, I know where this is headed, but so you're saying in the John Denver and in your dad that there's like ways that you could be in relationship to this music, to this man, that you lose with them, like that you can't be how you are with your dad with anyone that's not your dad.
That's right. And there's no getting that back. There's no, there's no substitute for it. And it's interesting. My dad was also a musician and a accomplished one, and he had been sort of a regional somebody before he got a grown up job after he had three kids, right? So
I don't know about this.
yeah.
What was
So
his?
he was the early era of sort of rockabilly. If you're familiar with the music, so late 1950s, early 1960s. He recorded at Sun Records, which was sort of made famous for Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee
Uh-huh.
Lewis. There are some collections from Sun Records that may have Johnny Cash and then John Tolleson. So he played rock and roll throughout kind of regional Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then went up to Canada and played with Levon Helm, who was with the band. Oh, wound up being with the band. If you've heard of them, I know this is for your parents' generation of music.
My dad loved the band. Yeah.
Okay, well, Levon Helm played with my dad before he played with them,
Wow.
and Ronnie Hawkins and Conway Twitty, and
Uh-huh.
so the first. My dad always said the first black man he really spent a lot of time with was Bo Diddley. So you're kind of going back in that because he grew up in sundown town, White Arkansas, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, music was a huge part of our family's sort of vibe and dynamic. And so, Jennifer has this wonderful video about 6 days before my dad died. He sat down at the piano. He had horrible symptoms from Parkinson's. He was cognitively not great. And he sits down at the piano and he bangs out and sings Fats Domino's Blueberry Hill, right? And Jennifer got a video of it. He died like 6 days later. So that pretty much summed up kind of who my dad was to his daughters. He was that joyful musician kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, no wonder it was easy for you to attach to like a folk idol or like a rock idol.
Yeah, like so, music being silenced. You think of that line, right? In American Pie, the day the music died, right? Is that the profound impact is that when that is gone, that everything you experienced, all the joy you had associated with it, feels like it's kind of gone too.
Yeah. Well, your sister had me read this Judith Butler essay about intersubjective grief, like that the thing that gets created between us actually Freud's idea was that in heartbreak we're decathecting, like we have to like take back all our little attachments and then we can give them to our second husband or wife or whatever. But her argument is like, if intersubjectivity is real, like if we really do make something between the two of us, when there's the loss of the relationship or someone passes, there is something that is you can't recapture.
Well, it's interesting that when you mentioned, I'm curious about that detaching so you can attach it elsewhere.
That's that in this paper, Mourning and Melancholia, Freud talks of, that's how he describes it, is you have to like, it's very painful to like extract yourself from the psychic relationship you have with that person. But once you get it back, if the relationship worked, like it's like his idea is like if you got enough from the parent or the lover or whatever, if it like went okay, then you can successfully but painfully extract and love again. And when you don't, that's what he calls melancholia, is when like the relationship was too harmful, or it didn't do what it was supposed to do, and so then you're left. You can never totally extract.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm sure that how he was defining extraction is most certainly something I'm not totally tracking, because I think of the things that I don't want to extract. I mean, these are people I don't want to delete out of my cell phone, right? Which I know is a really superficial example.
My mom's number in my phone is mom and dad. It will never change.
Yeah. And there's those things you're like, I'm not going to do that. And some of the old voicemails, if you're lucky, right? If you're lucky enough to still have and stuff. And, obviously, I'm sure Freud was talking about something far deeper than that, and he wasn't around for the cell phone era. But
He was talking truly about parent-child connections, and I think my understanding, and uh, but but that there's a different his that there's a difference between a melancholic, unending suffering that could be related to this versus just the pain, the like real pain. Um, and so there's no good there isn't an easy option.
no, no, but and well, that's interesting because I would say for sure, thinking about heartbreak as that phrase occurs to me, where you almost feel it physically, like the hole in the chest and stomach, and you can't solve it. And it just feels like all of that was very much around parental loss for me.
Yeah, what was it like?
So I remember I was there when my dad died, right? So they're still like physically there, laid out, and they're completely unreachable. And you become, or I became, like in my own mind, you're still very much that kid, right? And that's my dad, and he can't comfort me, and I can't reach him, and it's never, ever, ever going to change. It's just, and I know death is like unbelievably permanent, obviously, uh, by nature, but there was something about that, the permanence of it felt um, soul crushing in a way that other kinds of permanent losses never have for me.
In your body you had like a felt sense of like my soul's under attack.
Yeah, yeah. And I really struggled. And sort of, eventually you need to get back to work and get back to life. And I can't even imagine for those who lose spouses because you've got all those other pieces of putting a home together and all that. But for the longest time, other things just felt kind of unimportant because like that had happened and life is going on around you, right? And nobody else gets it. And everybody's like, oh, I remember when I lost my dad. It was so hard. We all have that reaction of like, well, yeah, but this was my dad, so he was extra important.
Totally.
But you're like, I'm sure your dad was fine. We're talking about mine, and that's a really
yeah. Oh, you mean Chris? No, mine was Ross. It was Ross who died.
Mine was extra. So,
but I forgot about this part actually. That there was like a something kind of like nihilistic. Like, what's the point? Like there was like kind of meaninglessness.
Yeah.
That followed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that really was one of those things maybe that it drew only way out is through, and that it subsided some of time. But it definitely took a while because it wasn't just like that my dad was gone. It was like everything that happened before then in terms of my identity of me and my family is forever changed because we don't get back and remember it together maybe. And it is, and the sibling, we have one sibling who is largely withdrawn from the rest of us in the wake of losing my parents. So, yeah, my family of origin is different with my parents gone. There's no central home that you would all go to and gather for the holidays, like the town they lived in, we don't really have any reason to go to now. And it's just that the things there's before and there's after, and things aren't ever the same. And it isn't just because the person's gone.
Everyone's different now. Yeah, it completely reconfigures the whole system.
Yeah. The main connection to nieces and nephews can be, well, that's my parents' grandchild. I mean, in addition to being my niece and nephew, fine, but like all those ways in which they're the vortex of family identity, right? So
Yeah. What? How did you deal?
I got closer to and communicated probably even more than ever with two. I have a twin sister,
Yeah,
and
I just learned this the other day.
yeah. So with my twin sister and with Jennifer, I think we actually communicated more. We
Yeah.
started with some Zooms. Some of it was just the simple commiseration, or some of it was to laugh about things. You know, you find that place of like, there are still the funny stories, things that happened that were funny when you were 30 are still
Yeah.
funny. You get you back in that space.
Uh,
But, you know, we have the fourth sister who's just kind of gone. And and knowing that that feels like it so dishonors my parents' memory, but it feels unfixable because really at that point, the only thing we had in common was sharing parents. A
yeah.
very different kind of worldview, probably more in the MAGA space, kind of, you know,
Oh,
yeah. So, and today's world, you know, politics divides us, and maybe
yeah.
it's because the politics is rising to the level of morality and humanity and all those things. But
Yeah. Well, your sister that I do know, you'll be probably happy to hear that she's really good at keeping our therapy political and about not having you, or at least like when I'm veering that way, she's like, yeah, come on.
yeah, that's so funny. I know some therapists would probably feel like, no, you can't go that way. You can't go there. But there's a point at which you got to be who you are, right? That's part of the.
Yeah, she's really let that be a part of the work. It's so nice. Um, do you? I don't want. I could. I'm not. I'm like really not through with what I want to know about this. But in the interest of time, I wonder. I'm asking people to help me build a heartbreak syllabus. Like if there's a book or a film or an album that um, that you felt like it really expressed your experience of heartbreak or was useful in heartbreak.
Um, I have a song, kind of
Mhm.
big surprise. Wildflowers by Tom Petty.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know the
You've
song,
heard
but
of Tom? No, you may
I
not
know Tom
play
Petty.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And for a guy who I loved as a, you know, sort of real rock and roll guy in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, then he came out with an album that was a little more folky. And you got to have a song that says you belong among the wildflowers. It speaks to me on kind of every level.
Yeah.
Nature, joy, all those things. So.
Thank you. This is the first. This is a new uh, like uh, idea I'm trying to introduce to this podcast. This is the first contribution.
Well, and clearly the most.
I
And you go,
I
of
think
course it was going to be music. Jennifer would probably have guessed. She might not have guessed that it was Tom Petty. She might have thought I sent you down the John Denver path.
well, she's got this thing with the Beatles, which
Yes,
which every once in a while she'll be like, this is like John Lennon. I'm like, whoa, that means something to you.
she is. Oh, she's hardcore. And before, I won't say before that, but overlapping with that, Prince
Mhm.
was another, like, she was fun. Speaking of being really devastated by the loss of an artist, Jennifer had a big thing with Prince. So you'll have to
Wow.
talk to her about that. So,
Yeah, I mean, talk about singular musical artists.
yeah.
Jeez.
Yep.
I did. Yeah, I feel like I don't. I didn't want to push too much, but because of our age difference and because the world has changed so much around like LGBTQ stuff. I am like I hope you'll maybe consider coming back one day to talk about your love life because
Yes, no, and I would love that because I love the world that the kids are getting to come out into today. But
yeah,
you know, and I know I had it easier than people that came out in the '50s where they could wind up arrested. But
yeah,
you know, people that never had to be afraid to hold hands. You know, I mean, or afraid that you could lose your job. I mean, it is a very different world, and I'm so glad. I never dreamed I'd be allowed to legally marry in my lifetime. Never imagined.
yeah,
And here
yeah.
we are. So Absolutely.
I'd love to hear at some point about like making romance happen under like those more violent conditions. I know, like even in my, I'm born in 1982, and I also have that feeling of like, great for the kids, but like, but do you want to know about what they told me at summer camp or like,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So, and I think for men, formerly boys, right? For boys, the the peer dangers are. Yeah, I mean, I feared being ostracized, but I wasn't going to get probably the shit kicked out of me the way a young man.
yeah, they were nice to me in the town I'm from. I don't know why. Like it could have, like there was violence and terrors and fear, but I never got the shit kicked out of me too bad.
Yeah. Well, but then there's that other piece too. Like when we were talking about the things that are patronizing. Because I don't know if this happened with you with young gay men. Then the fag hag notion, right? Like all the girls, sometimes even like all the cheerleaders, they loved the little Queenie gay kid, but it wasn't like real. He was like the group pet,
Yeah, yeah. I had a bit.
and they're like, well,
I had
that's
a bit.
obnoxious.
Uh-huh. I had a bit of that. The gay patronizing thing that makes me nuts is when my aunts or uncles or like adults who were around when I was a kid will say like, "Wow, we knew," and I'm like, "Yeah, I fucking knew. We just couldn't talk." And like, then why didn't you help? Like, what? Like, congratulations, you can spot a gay child. Like, what?
And what did you do for said gay child to make it easier? That's
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god.
oh, all right. It
Um,
has been absolutely delightful, and I know my other ones should come up here pretty quick. But
Julie, thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it. Let me know if you need anything else from me.